Here's another thing I like to say to all you religious types, all you fanatics and kooks out there. Hey, you think there's like angels and spirits and God and souls and all that? Well, people believe in crazy things all the time. I'd believe in that if you brought down Zeus or Pan or Hera or Aphrodite or whatever god you want. You bring them right here. Come on, I'll believe them. Well, same thing about your God. He's the same sort of thing. He's no different. You just pretend he is. But you ain't seen any nymphs or centaurs. Nobody's seen that. Same way nobody's seen any angels. Nobody's seen a soul. Nobody's ever seen a soul. That's because all there is matter. The reason why I don't believe materialism is a viable possibility, given that materialism is the only alternative to the existence of God, the soul, and so on, a spiritual realm, if you deny that those things exist, then necessarily you're going to be a materialist. If you deny that there is the spiritual, then all that you are left with is the material, unless you want to be a solipsist. That's somebody who thinks that the entire world is an illusion and only their own ego exists, but that's usually relegated to the realm of juvenilia and nobody discusses it. It's considered a pseudo-problem. But when it comes to materialism, the reason why I don't think it passes muster philosophically is because materialism itself seems to be self-refuting when it comes to thought. What I mean is, materialism says that all that exists is matter because there is no God and no soul. But if that's the case, then given that that statement comes from their mind, they're going to have to explain how their mind can come up with propositions that are both meaningful and true. Now, if you're a materialist, you don't believe that your mind is anything other than your brain. And if that's the case, you have to explain one thing. Why is it when you come up with a proposition that you deem to be logically valid and maybe even is, you believe that you can assign to it truth value? That is, why do you think your mind is ordained to the truth? Now, immediately, the materialist or atheist or any ordinary human being, because this is an abstruse question, would usually come up with common sense answers like, well, the brain is evolved so as to tell the truth because evolution dictated that survival of the fittest would be the norm for continuing species, and humans just happen to be the lucky ones which evolved the cleverer brain, and therefore we can rightfully believe that we're smarter than all other beings because we rule the planet, and so it seems to be the case that our minds correspond to the truth. Okay, well that seems to be a sufficient answer. But what has to be kept in mind here is that if you're a materialist who reduces the mind to the brain, and yet you believe that your brain can tell you the truth, then to come up with any reason for why you believe your mind, that is your brain, can tell you the truth, you will have to present an argument. Now notice what this involves you in. To create an argument, you're going to have to use your mind. There's simply no other way you can come up with an argument, logically speaking. But if you do that, and you use your mind to come up with an argument for why your mind tells you the truth, then notice what you're doing. You're committing what logicians call the fallacy of begging the question, assuming as a given the very thing you have to prove to be true. It's also been called circular logic, or the petitio in Latin. Now what's wrong with this is, if the question is, why do you have reasons to believe your mind tells you the truth? And you give any argument you care to name as to why it is the case that your mind tells you the truth, then that argument will have to presuppose already at the outset that your mind does tell you the truth, or else you couldn't even come up with an argument in order to try and justify the idea that your mind does tell you the truth. In other words, you're involved in a vicious circle logically, and you're not actually proving that your mind tells you the truth. You're assuming that your mind tells you the truth in the very effort to come up with a proof that your mind tells you the truth, because the only proof you can give is based on your own mind. So this is why, even according to the rubrics of logic, this would be considered a textbook case fallacy. So there's only one recourse you can have if you realize this, that you can't prove that your mind tells you the truth. All you can do is either trust that your mind tells you the truth or distrust that your mind tells you the truth. But why, if you are a materialist who believes that your mind is just the brain, that your brain was not designed by an intelligence greater than itself, that intelligence being actually ordained to the truth and the creator of your brain, so that your brain itself was designed to know the truth, Why then would you have reason to trust your mind when you believed it was telling you the truth? Now, I'm not saying that therefore you know for sure your brain is not telling you the truth. I'm just saying you have no reason to trust that it would be, and you cannot argue that it is, or else you will be logically in a circle. The only reason you have any philosophically warranted basis for trusting that your mind is ordained to the truth is, first of all, to believe that truth is universal, timeless, and binding upon all minds. If you're in a materialist universe where all that exists is just a mindless flux of atoms in the curvature of space, and there is no permanency everywhere, anywhere, but all is in a flux, and all is in a permanent state of change, then you have no reason to believe that there is such a thing as truth that is universal, timeless, and binding upon all minds. Secondly, if you believe that your mind is reducible to the brain, and your brain is the product of randomness and not of design, then even if you did believe that there was this truth that was, so to speak, timeless and eternal, which you don't have reason to believe, but even if you did believe that, then you would have no reason to believe that your mind could correspond to it. Because, as I said, you would have no reason to trust that your mind was ordained to the truth, which would just mean you would have to end in total skepticism. Now, if that's the case, that you have to end in total skepticism, then you cannot assert any form of proposition as true whatsoever, no matter what it may be. Now that means that the proposition, God does not exist, all that exists is material reality, is something you cannot assert because you are constrained by your own logic to be a total skeptic. So what is the result of that? That effectively means you cannot be an atheist, and you cannot raise arguments against theism of any kind whatsoever.